Hello and welcome to this presentation on how to design if you happen to be a non-designer. Now, it's hardly a shock that a lot of people who end up in business are not necessarily gifted artists. They have other core competencies that they're focusing on. And yet for all of us, it's important at some point in time that we are able to get our ideas across to other people, whether that's through our web pages, whether it's through presentations like this one, or anything we're creating, brochures, white papers, blogs, whatever it is, to have a sense of how elements can come together to be engaging and interesting and allow people to get the meaning of what it is you're trying to communicate. So in this session, I want to spend a little bit of time and talk about some of the fundamentals of design for those of us who are not necessarily naturally gifted as designers. And a lot of what we're going to be looking at really is how do we use design to do a better job of communicating? Because at the end of the day, that's really what we do in business. We're trying to constantly get ideas across, whether it's to get people to buy our content, our products and services, whether it's to sell our ideas, or whether it's to present ourselves from a public relations standpoint or marketing, all those things. So everything we go back to from a business standpoint really is based upon being able to communicate effectively in order to do what we need to do. So I want to talk a little bit about how we focus on setting some good communication best practices, including identifying what it is we're trying to say, who we're trying to say it to, so setting some clear communications goals. We also want to design so that we're reaching our goals. What's the purpose of doing this in the first place? If I say, hey, I'm going to do a presentation, well, is there a purpose behind it? And how do I focus the communication and the points I'm trying to make so that that presentation has clarity? And also, oftentimes, especially when we're creating content for online use, we want to make sure that it's engaging. We want to make sure that people want to interact with the content and that it draws their attention and hopefully holds their attention for a while. The ultimate goal of anything that we do is we're trying to move information. Now, it sounds a little bit fundamental when you say it that way, but in a lot of ways, what we're really trying to do from a business standpoint, whether it's to sell content or whether it's to market ideas, etc., is we want to move information from one place to another. And often it's really from the presentation space. Once again, our website or this kind of a presentation into the minds of your core audience, your target, who it is you're trying to share this content with. Now, once again, it's a very easy thing to say, and it's not necessarily an easy thing to do. Because the challenge we run into is, especially when we're dealing with people who are talking to people, is that there's a lot of information that's flowing back and forth. Now, if you set up a conversation between two people, and this is a standard interpersonal communications model, each person takes on actually two roles. Well, the first role is of an encoder. They're an information encoder. They take information that's in their minds and they put it into language, they put it into words, and they put it into what they hope will be the best way to communicate an idea with somebody else. Now, that other person is also an encoder, but they also are a decoder. The content that's arriving as these two people have a conversation, that person's job is to take that information and to parse it, to pull it apart and to extract the meaning from it so they better understand what's being communicated. And that's what you and I are doing right now. I'm encoding content for you. You're listening to my voice. You understand my language. You understand what the words and the meaning behind everything I'm saying are, and now you can take that information and get a better understanding of what information, what picture I'm trying to share with you. Now, this is a fairly standard approach, but one of the biggest challenges with any type of communication is that between the two sides, in this case two people, there is always a layer of noise. Now, noise is really just that. It's anything that gets in the way from the message successfully getting from point to point. And noise can be represented by, well, actual noise. You might be having a conversation with someone and someone's got a lawnmower running next to you and you can't hear what the person is saying. So that's noise. But noise can also be attitudinal noise. It could be, well, I hear what you're saying just fine, but I don't like you. I don't agree with you. I don't want to be having this conversation with you. I'm not listening, la, 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 that kind of thing. It can also be noise based upon the inability to understand. So you're trying to have a conversation with somebody else, but they don't speak the same language that you speak. So they can hear you just fine. They may like you just fine, but they still can't understand what it is you're trying to communicate to them because there is a barrier in the way, in the form of language. Of course, this also deals with things like jargon. You're trying to talk to an attorney or a doctor, and they're using this special code language that you don't understand. You can hear them fine. You just can't communicate. And the other thing that we have when we do interpersonal communication is we have a level of visual feedback that's ongoing. So if I'm trying to talk to someone and they can't hear me, They oftentimes might give me some sort of a visual cue, such as cupping their ear with their hand to say, I can't hear you, which will allow me to change my message either by speaking louder or moving closer to that person so they can hear me. So we're constantly feeding each other a lot of information back and forth when we talk, but also how we behave, our body language, that kind of thing. Now, this is a fairly standard model. But of course, we live in a world where a lot of the communication that we're doing is not face-to-face. We're doing it online, and we're doing it through our computers and through our mobile devices. So it really changes the dynamic quite a bit. And the challenge with this is when we start looking at interactive communications models. When I create content like this presentation that I'm creating right now, my job is to create basically a message that I can share with you. Now I'm going to save this as a video, and I'm going to take this video and I'm going to put it online. And at some point in the future, you're going to be listening to it. Now the challenge that I have as someone who's putting this content together, as an encoder, is that I don't necessarily know who you are. I don't know what your needs are. I don't know what your language is. I don't know an awful lot about you. So I have to make a lot of assumptions about how we're going to communicate. So a lot of the time what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something that is going to hopefully reach a larger audience, a generalized audience, because I can't be very specific here, can I? I really have to create a one-size-fits-all message if I don't know all that much about my audience other than they have a computer or a mobile device, and they're able to use that to watch this presentation and understand what it is I'm trying to communicate with them. So when we start looking through different lenses as to how we communicate, obviously there's a difference between how we would communicate face-to-face and how we communicate online. Now I want to talk about the online aspects today because that's a huge part of how we all communicate in modern business, by creating online representations for what it is that we do for a living. And we share that information with other people readily. But do other people readily understand what it is that we are trying to communicate to them? And that's the question we want to try to answer today. So I want to talk about digital design, and digital design is just that. It really is an opportunity for us to take the digital realm, our computers, our tablets, our other mobile devices, cell phones, things like that, and create content that will attract the attention of the people we're trying to talk to, will effectively communicate the messages that we want to share with them, and it will do so in a way that is comfortable and natural for those people. So digital design is really bringing all of those elements together into a single entity, a ball, if you will. And it's a combination of things like graphics and fonts and layouts and interactive features and other things that help to focus and deliver the message. So if I'm creating, let's say, an online ad as a digital marketer, then I need to think about how this is going to look, how it's going to attract the attention of the people I want to attract attention to, what the colors look like, what fonts are being used, and whether or not the message is being effectively presented so that I can engage with it as a consumer, or I should say somebody else will engage with it as a consumer, and understand what my meaning is, understand what the benefits of the message are, what the offer is, that kind of thing. We also want to make the content that we create for other people interesting. We want it to be engaging because we want people to not only see it, but we want them to remember it. We want them to find it very easy to understand and comforting in a lot of ways. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. So what I want to talk about is 3 different phases of digital design. The first phase is content design, and content design looks at the message. It's the meat of the message. It's the meaning. It's really what we're trying to get from point A to point B, okay? In a lot of ways, it's sometimes a very simple message. You could buy our products and services because, fill in the blank. They're fantastic. We're the best in the business. Whatever that message is needs to be able to be identified, first of all, and then we need to figure out the best way to move it from point A to point B. Now, point A could be your website, it could be a landing page, it could be an ad space, it could be a blog, it could be a podcast. You understand where we're going with this. And then we'll talk about usability, which is the face of the message. It's what the end user ends up interacting with or within to get a better understanding of how the message gets delivered through this media. And we're also going to talk about the skin of the message, which is really the pretty part. It's the visual design aspects of what it is that we create that grabs the attention of people and allows them to say, ooh, that looks good, that looks comfortable, that kind of thing. And so with the content design and usability and visual design all combined perfectly, you create something which is more interactive and from a digital design standpoint, attracts the attention, delivers the message, and gets the meaning across. At least that's the overall goal. So let's talk a little bit about content design to kick things off and get a better sense of what we're really trying to talk about here. Well, when we talk about content design, at the end of the day, everything that we do is about our audience. Now, our audience could be our customers, it could be our prospects, it could be people that we're presenting information to, it could be the folks coming to our YouTube channel, it could be the folks reading our blog. The audience is a constantly evolving, changing entity. And one of the things we need to know about the people that we're going to talk to in the first place is if we say, hey, I'm going to have a conversation with unknown people, well, is there something I can do to do a better job of defining what these people want, what they need, what interests them, etc. And what we're really trying to do when we communicate to anybody else is we're trying to leave behind some sort of information. We want to have the audience retain understanding. Whether it's to watch this presentation and say, okay, now I understand the fundamentals of content design, or whether it's to see our ad and understand why they might be interested in buying your product and service and what the benefits are, etc. So there's a leave behind. So when we interact, when we have this connection with somebody else, what information or knowledge or understanding does the audience or that individual audience member end up retaining? How can we, as communicators, make it easy to learn and understand that information? How can we present information in such a way that's going to make it kind of fun or interesting or engaging for the people we're trying to talk to, our audience? And how do we know what it is that our audience wants? Are we presenting them with the right information? Is it relevant content? Or are we just kind of spraying it around hoping that the right people end up seeing it? And this is a conversation for another day in some senses. But a big part of what we want to do is make sure that we're creating content, that we know who we're creating it for, and that we're creating it in a way that's going to engage the people we want to talk to. Not everybody, because we never, ever really want to talk to everybody, right? We want to talk to the people who are going to be able to take advantage of the information that's being presented, do something with it, better understand it. So that's our overall goal. So we have to define our audience. We have to get a better sense of what it is. Now, the challenge, of course, when we do content design is it's not sexy. A lot of times it's really kind of, who are we doing? I often say that the best planning tools in the world are a sharpened pencil and a legal pad. Not sexy, but incredibly necessary. Now, years and years ago when I was working in television production, we had some general rules that if we went out and shot a lot of videotape, fantastic, but we had to then log it. It basically means watching all the videos and doing transcripts of everything that you recorded. So now you have transcripts, you have printed pages of everything that's being said, and now you just use a pair of scissors and some tape and you build what it is that you think is going to work. Now, why did we do it this way? Well, once again, this is back a number of years, and access to editing equipment was harder to come by. It was really more expensive. And when you're spending $300 an hour for editing suite, guess what? You're not going to spend a lot of time in there going, well, let me see, what should we do here? You want to make sure that when you walk into the building, you have everything pretty much laid out. It's going to be a little wiggle room perhaps, but you're going to make sure that everything's been done on paper because it gives you the opportunity to make mistakes. No, that's not going to work. Okay, I tried that. No, let's move this over here. And so that's the way we want to do it. But it also allows you to focus on the message and creating good content in the first place. If you do this on paper, you can make mistakes affordably. You can say, okay, that's not going to work. I'm glad we didn't start building the presentation or start building the software or the website or anything like that. Now that we've kind of figured out what's going to work, what's not going to work, and we've wireframed it or whatever it is we needed to do, it gives us an opportunity to get a better sense of if it's going to work for our needs or not. Now, it's something very important I want to point out here is that when we have good content, it allows us to create a good shell around it. It allows us to create something that says, okay, we have something that's really important that we want to share with you. And the problem we run into sometimes, and by the way, you see this with modern movies all the time. You'll see a movie that has lots and lots of special effects and woo, and then the story is almost non-existent. And a lot of times movies like this just really don't engage people. Okay, so I saw a whole bunch of really cool special effects, but as a movie, as a way to entertain myself, it really wasn't that entertaining. It was more of a looking at visual effects, I suppose. So good content generates good design, but not the other way around. And the same thing holds true for what we put together. If we start with good stuff, it's easier to build around it and sell it. If we start with stuff that's really not been well thought out, Doesn't matter how great your design is, the content is still not going to be engaging enough. It's the old adage of GIGO, if you're familiar with that, the acronym GIGO, which stands for garbage in, garbage out. If you start with swamp water, it's a little hard to work it all the way up to being a fine sparkling beverage. So one of the things we need to do if we're going to go out there and reach an audience is we need to isolate the main message. We need to figure out, first of all, what our audience wants to know, what they need to know, what's interesting to them, what's going to engage them, and work from that standpoint. So once again, we're not just creating a message that's going to go out to everyone. We have a specific group of people that we want to talk to, and those people are going to be the people who are going to be most interested in what we're offering. And we also have to make sure that whatever new content that we create is not so new that there's no frame of reference in that user's mind. So for example, if I'm talking to you and I say, hey, I want to talk to you about something brand new that you've never ever heard about, and suddenly I'm talking way above your head. Okay, that's not going to work. It's not going to engage you for a number of reasons. One of them is you're going to feel probably inept to a certain degree. Nobody likes to be caught napping with stuff they don't understand. So I want to make sure when I'm creating a main message that I use an existing anchor. Now, an anchor is really something you already understand. And a lot of times if we use analogies or metaphors when we're presenting new information, when that thing you do like that, you understand that. Now, well, that is like this. And so oftentimes by being able to have people go, oh, okay, I understand. I understand how it all comes together, because you've taken a new idea and you attached it to an old idea, which I already understand. And that works. All right, so that's just one of the things to point out there. A lot of times when you're creating new content, you don't want it to be so new that it's foreign to people, because that's off-putting. They don't really care for it. But what we're really trying to do is we're trying to give our audience member, the end user, our prospects, however we categorize them, we want them to say when they see this information initially, why should I pay attention to this? What's in it for me? And that gives us an opportunity to start the conversation. If we say to them, hey, by the way, I want you to read this white paper, you will learn all of these really important things that are going to help your bottom line as a business. Or you're going to learn, how to be a better student, or how to be a better parent, or whatever it is that they're interested in learning about. So they're constantly looking for, we're all looking for as consumers, what's in it for me? When I go into the supermarket, I'm looking for stuff that is interesting to me. I'm looking for food that I want to eat. Okay, I'm not shopping for anybody else generally, obviously outside from my family. But the point is I'm constantly running the world through a me filter. And the me filter is the same one that everybody else has, right? Everyone's kind of looking at what is in it for me. What can I do? Why should I pay attention? Why should I care? So we're constantly looking for things that are going to benefit us personally. Now, when we have a message that appears to us, whether it's an advertising message or whether it's an article that we're reading or whether it's a presentation like this one, we want to ask ourselves, what's the best way to get that information into my head from a consumer standpoint? And of course, when we're creating this content, how can I do the best job of delivering this information to my audience? Now, the answer to that oftentimes is to make it interesting, make it engaging, make it eye-catching. Use text and use graphics and use audio and use video and use interactivity and design and formatting and whatever we have to get our message across. Do the best job we can of putting it together in a nice, happy, fun, interesting bundle so that the person seeing it at the end is going, oh, that's really cool. That's interesting. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to learn. And in the context of doing this, the message will be delivered. When we look at the content and how content gets pushed from point to point, a lot of it really is based upon our assumptions. Now, we all have history. We've all looked at the world through our eyes for a number of years, and we have certain shortcuts, right? We're constantly thinking about what the meaning of things is, even without really understanding what the meaning of things is. So, you've heard the old expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, in a lot of ways, when we show somebody something, it allows them to infer meaning. We don't even have to communicate directly what the meaning is, because people are already going to make assumptions as to what it is that the meaning is or what the message is. Let me give you an example. So I went out and I said, hey, I'm going to go find me something that's representative of the audience that I'm searching for. Now, if I were to show this to you and say, all right, who is the audience for this website? Who would you recommend be the person who would most benefit from this? You'd probably go and say, okay, well, it's a game portal. We've got some images that look representative of, first-person shooter games or adventure games, and it's got this kind of cyberpunk metallic look to it. So I'm thinking, all right, so for gamers, of course, maybe teenage boys, young men would be more of the demographic I'm going for. And that's really what we're working with. So we're going to make some assumptions just by looking at this. Within instantaneous, this is going to be for this audience. Now, if I go and say, all right, wait, let's change the content around. All right, we're not going to change the design, but I'm going to change the content around, and let's see if it works. So here we go. All right, so now I've gotten rid of all of these, cyberpunk images, and we have brides. Okay, it's now Elena's bridal boutique, or is it? Well, it doesn't matter what I've done with the pictures here because the interface is still screaming gamer, right? If you saw this, your brain would go, wait a minute, it doesn't matter how many pictures of brides. It doesn't matter how much I change up the text that's on this page so that it talks about bridal showers. When I look at this page, my first assumption, my first understanding, without even reading anything, is not that this is a page for someone who's interested in buying a wedding dress. Okay? This is a page that is kind of a hot mess right now because it really has too many different messages going on. So when we think about design, we have to think also about the assumptions that people make. What they expect to see oftentimes drives forward their overall acceptance of information. Now, we all have personal perception. Once again, we have these shortcuts that we look, at the world through our eyes. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about things sometimes. We already know what it is that we want and like. Now, let me ask you a really strange question. First of all, what's your favorite color? Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Why is that your favorite color? Right? Has anyone ever asked you that before? What's your favorite food? Okay, I have a couple, but why? Because it's the food I like the most. I don't sit down and intellectualize it and think, okay, why do I like this food? I like it because I like it. Okay, my favorite song is something that makes me feel good. It's good meaning. That my favorite food is something that tastes good, makes me feel good. Whatever it is. So we have our own perceptions of the world. We know what it is that we want or like. But the interesting thing about that is if I present something to you and not give you a lot of time to make a decision, not to think about it, certainly not to overthink about it, can you make a decision? So let's try that. By the way, congratulations. You just won a house lottery. How about that? Brand new house. Well, new for you. And so I'm giving a house away, but you get to choose which one you want. So here we go. By the way, you need to tell me what house you want in 3, 2, 1. Okay, yell at the number. Which house do you want? All right. Now, the interesting thing about this, and when I do this presentation live, is everybody will yell out a different number. And I'll say, okay, well, why did you decide that 1 was the house? And by the way, you didn't have enough time to look at all the houses very carefully and figure out what your criteria was for which house you wanted most of all. What you did is you looked at a bunch of houses and you said, that one appeals to me the most. And if I say to you why, odds are that you can't tell me. You really don't know. It's like asking you why you like your favorite food. All right. So which house did you choose? Well, you probably have reasons. And in retrospect, what I've done is I'll say, okay, why did you choose number 1? And people will make up answers. People will explain to me categorically why they chose number 1 or number 3, even though at the time they made the decision, that information wasn't running through their heads. They didn't really have that criteria. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, I bring it up because this is how people make decisions all day long. Let's go back to the supermarket for a moment. Now, if I had to go to the supermarket and look at every single item on every single shelf and make some sort of a decision as to whether it was the kind of thing I wanted or not, it would take, a week and a half to go grocery shopping? The thing is I don't have that. I have the shortcuts. I've done grocery shopping before, which makes it a lot easier. So I go in the door and I grab my basket and I say, all right, by the way, I want to get some bananas. I like bananas. Okay, I eat bananas. By the way, I don't even know what that is, but I don't eat it because I don't like it because it's not familiar to me. I've never had it, whatever. All right. Now that's shorthand. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it is how we'll approach things. By the way, I like this brand of mustard. By the way, I'm going to get this kind of bread. So we go through and we grab the things that are familiar to us. We have criterion that we use when we go grocery shopping based upon experience. But oftentimes if we sat down and analyzed it and said, well, why do you buy that loaf of bread? Why not this loaf of bread? Once again, we don't necessarily have that answer, do we? We don't know why we make the decisions that we make oftentimes, and yet we still make them. Now, I bring this up because when we look at something like content design, design is weird. Design is often subjective. And I've often said, every so often, you go to somebody's home and you see something hanging over their sofa and your first thought is, my God, is all your taste in your mouth, right? We try not to voice these things out loud, but oftentimes we get critical of other people's taste because design is subjective. What we like is what we like. What we don't like is what we don't like, but it's personal. And it's really hard for people to define. So, what is art, right? Art is what you like, bad art is what other people like, apparently. But the thing is whatever it is that caters to us emotionally, whatever it is that works for us, makes us happy, makes us feel good, gives us meaning, is very personal. So once again, it's very hard to put your finger on it. So when we create content for other people, we have to really think about what it is that's going to resonate with them, what's going to resonate with their tastes. So what is it about our audience that we know? What is it that we're able to do? Is the information that we're going to present to them, is it relevant to their needs? When the message has been presented, does the audience remember the important things, the things we want? And how easy can we make it to understand and remember that information? Now, by using this type of design, hopefully the answer is yes, we can meet all three of these goals. Once again, we need to constantly work to avoid noise. Now, design noise, like any other kind of communications noise, is very real. And oftentimes if I look at something and my first thought is, oh, that's so ugly, that's so hard to understand, the colors are garish, whatever it is, that's design noise, right? So I don't want to have any elements of my design that are getting in the way of my message being delivered. The design that I wrap around my message is designed, hopefully, to do a better job of delivering that message. That's what I'm trying to do. So I want to use the design elements that I have to do a better job of communicating what I'm trying to get across. Now, of course, things like inappropriate fonts, poor color selection, content that is on a page, but there's really no message. There's nothing there to hold it up and make it interesting. And also, when we talk about interactivity, because the online world is highly interactive, right? If I go to a web page, it's not just sitting and watching and having stuff flow into my eyes. I have to make decisions. I'm constantly clicking on things and going places and doing links and whatever it is. But I need information that's going to tell me what to do next oftentimes. Because if I have to spend a lot of time guessing what it is that the designer wants me to do, chances are I'm just going to get frustrated and give up. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and how to get past some of the elements of noise when we talk about usability. Now, as I said, usability is the face of the message. It's the part that allows the end user to interact with whatever we're putting together. Okay, so we've isolated a message, we've got a sense of what it is we're trying to say and the best way to say it. Now we need to create a format that's going to allow us to interact that message with our end user. So let's talk a little bit about usability. Now, when we talk about usability design, what we're trying to really do is create a way to engage with other people. We want to get a response. We want them to spend some time, pay attention. So we're going to create environments, whether it's a landing page or a presentation or even a brochure. We want to create something that's going to appeal to their sense of aesthetics, if nothing else. But also, if they're looking for information, we want to be able to say, oh, by the way, we're the solution you're looking for. Here's the information. Now, it could be as simple as something like a Google search ad, right? If I have the right information and I'm visually appealing, which is hard to do when you're putting together Google search ads, but it allows me to create a connection with that user. Because they're looking for meaning. They're looking for an answer to a question oftentimes. I have a problem. Do you have a solution? So how do we create stuff to help appeal to that sense of exploration? Well, I work in digital advertising. So I spend a lot of time thinking about digital advertising and how we engage with people. Now, there's some really fun, bad examples. This ad here I had to grab because I laughed so hard when it came out. So I'm not sure you can see it very well, but it says, "Are you going to burn in hell? Yes or no?" Now, the whole purpose of this ad is to get people to click on it. Okay, so it's a kind of a skeevy ad in a lot of ways because it doesn't tell you what's in it for you. But your brain just goes, I need to answer this question. I need to get in there. And I'm sure both of the buttons take you to exactly the same place. I don't think there's any real interactivity in this. But I love the ad in the sense that it constantly grabs you and just, I want to get involved. I want to engage with this ad, even if it's nonsensical. I love this in the sense that it came out several years ago. Click here to turn off this ad. Well, okay, it looks like a big button. Who's not going to want to click on this to turn off the ad? And what the heck does turning off an ad mean? By the way, this one kind of turned off the ad. It made it look different. But, once again, it's about engaging people. It's about creating content that grabs people's attention and says to them, get involved, touch me, do something with me. Perhaps one of the dumbest campaigns in the history of advertising, and yet you couldn't look away, right? Why would I want to shoot a cantaloupe? And yet I had an opportunity. If I clicked my mouse when the crosshairs were over the cantaloupe, it exploded like a cantaloupe. So why am I shooting the cantaloupe? Once again, I can't answer that question, but I do know that there's something going on. I understand fundamentally that if I move my mouse, I move the crosshairs, and the gun allows me to shoot cantaloupes. Right? Now, that in itself is really not enough to get me going, but it does grab my attention. It starts that conversation, and it communicates to me, hey, there's something that you can do here as a consumer. There's something that you can do to get involved. Once again, another just kind of really goofy ad, but it's hard to look away. Okay, you just kind of look at this and, get in touch with former schoolmates, type in your school's name. By the way, this isn't even an interactive ad. If I go to click on that to type something in, I automatically get clicked through to the website. Right? Not my favorite practice from a marketing standpoint, but once again, from a creative standpoint, I can't really ignore it very well. It's a very engaging ad. Okay. Now, even things like this, and this is really going off the goofy train here, but Metamucil, for those of you who don't know what Metamucil is, it's a fiber additive to help you stay more digestively regular. But we're going to see any cool concerts this summer. We're rocking out with our Xylem husks out. So they're really trying to promote the idea of fiber and catering to people who are going to concerts. Once again, your brain kind of just says, but you look at this and you say there's a path here. There's a conversation starting here, and I can get involved. Now, I'm not saying that any of these are fantastic ads. In a lot of ways, most of these ads are kind of horrid. But what I am saying is that they've done a good job from a design standpoint of attracting my attention and probably your attention, because I understand instantaneously what the value is within it, but it's also aesthetically engaging. All right, so there's something there for me. So when I think about this, we think about how we create environments. We want to make sure that when people get involved, they get involved in the right way. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story of Blendtec. Blendtec is a company that sells the Total Blender. Now, Blendtec was dealing with a marketing challenge, which was they're trying to sell a high-tech blender. Now, most of us can go down to our local Target and pick up a blender pretty affordably, okay? You spend probably under $40 and you got something that is going to be sufficient, crushes ice, makes that lovely banana smoothie, etc. What's in a blender? Well, Blendtec was selling a $400 blender. And so when you start looking at that and say, okay, well, why would I spend $400 on a blender when I can spend 1/10 of that and also get a blender? So the challenge that the company ran into is, how do they get people engaged? How do they get people to start to think about why they should spend more money on this super duper blender and not just your garden variety, easy blender? And so they came up with a website idea. And one of the things they wanted to do is first of all, they started by putting out some recipes. Well, here's some blender recipes. Well, yeah, that might engage some people, but it really wasn't the kind of thing that grabbed people's attention to any great degree. So how do I get people to think about my blender? How do I get people to understand that this is not just any blender? This is a super blender, okay? And by the way, I don't know how much you've ever spent in your life thinking about blenders, but it's an interesting place to go to look at something like, how would you sell a $400 blender to someone who might not really understand the overall value? So what the company did is they came up with an area of their website called Will It Blend? And chances are a number of you have already seen some of the Will It Blend things. And they just created the "Don't try this at home" area. And it's the funniest thing. They're no longer making the videos, but they're still up there. But if you go, basically Tom Dickinson, who is here being represented with the lab coat, every week or so would blend something else that you really shouldn't put in a blender. So here it's a Nike, so if you want a running shoe, an iPhone, Mario Kart, cans of pork and beans came through one time. I think at one point he blended an entire mop handle. The thing is you watch this, and yes, it's kind of a teenage boy fare in a lot of ways. So, woo, look, we're destroying things. But the other side of it is when he's done, and the patter is fun. It's really fun videos. They're really cute. Your brain just can't help but kind of make this assumption that a blender that fantastic that can blend up an iPhone is probably not going to have a hard time making a really good banana strawberry smoothie. Okay. And so when you ask yourself the question, which I would ask myself in marketing, is, okay, fine, this is cute and all, but did it make a difference in their sales? The answer is absolutely yes. After this campaign started running, according to BlendTech, sales of the blender jumped 1,700%. Right? So how did this happen? Because they created an interesting way to engage consumers. They created a way to get people involved in their brand, to answer the question, what's in it for you, and to do so in a way that was non-threatening and really fun and engaging for the end user. Now, when we talk about usability design, one of the things we really have to think about is, okay, how many assumptions can I make about whether people are going to understand something or not understand something? It's incredibly important for us to be able to create content that people are going to be able to take advantage of, be able to understand or watch. And if I'm using language that's over their heads, or if I'm using some sort of technology that's really hard to understand, or the navigation doesn't make any sense, etc., what works? So the question we ask ourselves oftentimes is, what is intuitive? If I were to show you something and say, how was this used, would you understand what is intuitive and wasn't intuitive? Now, oftentimes, and I did design early on in my career, we were doing things like kiosks. So a kiosk would be an interesting example because sometimes it might be put in a public place like a mall. And so we couldn't make a lot of assumptions about what people's understandings were of computer use. And of course, this is going back 10, 15 years. And so as a result, we had to really think about how to make things as intuitive as possible. So if we created a kiosk that was touchscreen, for example, you had to make sure you let people know very definitively that this is a touchscreen. And so you can put the words up, by the way, touchscreen to begin, that works. Or you can give them a simple task of, drag the car keys to the waiting car to, start your session or whatever it is. But give them a sense, communicate with them what they need to do, how they need to interact so that they can get the conversation started. Now, one of the things I started doing several years ago because, well, frankly, it amused me, is sitting down and every time I found some really great bad example of where intuitive design went off the rails or where the consumer did not make the right assumptions, I thought it was very interesting. So I'll share a few of these with you. This is a tag. By the way, thanks to lawyers, we have some really good tags that appear on products these days. Now, this is on a Sears hair dryer. And by the way, just in case you are aware of this or not aware of this, you should not use this product while sleeping. Now, once again, you ask yourself, what was the precedent for this, I wonder? So I'm sure somebody blow drying their hair, fell asleep, burned the bed, whatever it is. But don't use while sleeping. How about this one? This is on a bag of Fritos, and it says, you could be a winner. No purchase necessary. Details inside. So you don't have to purchase it, but you might have to steal it because otherwise, unless you're opening the bag in the store, you're going to have a problem getting this offer. A hotel-provided shower cap in a box. Now, we've all been there, right? We go to the hotel, they have that shower cap. You're looking at it, you're thinking, can I wear this with a friend? No, my friends, it fits only one head. Once again, why someone thought this was necessary to point out is a little bewildering. This is on a tiramisu dessert. Now, by the way, this is written on the bottom of the box. It says, do not turn upside down. So usually by the time you've read this, you've already turned it upside down. That kind of goes with the territory. This is on a bread pudding product. And once again, I like the stating of the obvious here. Product will be hot after heating. So, by the way, we're just trying to avoid a lawsuit. If you burn yourself, we already warned you this is going to happen. On the packaging for a Rowenta iron. So ironing clothes is something that a lot of people do. And I thought this was actually probably one of the dumbest things in my collection until I read about a professional baseball player who was hospitalized for doing just this. So, ladies and gentlemen, please do not iron clothes that you're wearing on your body. Okay? Just sounds like a really bad idea. This is where we run into sometimes something lost in translation. So this is on a Korean-made kitchen knife. Here's the tag. It says, warning, keep out of children. Now, I'm sure that's advice we can all take to heart. Not a good thing. A string of Chinese-made Christmas lights, by the way, just so you're aware. They are for indoor or outdoor use only. Okay, so not sure what that leaves, but whatever it is, don't do it. This was on a Japanese-made food processor. Once again, just to be aware, this should not be used for the other use. So whatever the other use that your intentions were, don't do it. This is on a packet of Sainsbury's peanuts, and once again, stating the obvious perhaps, but warning, contains nuts. So, yeah, allergies, you can certainly take them seriously, but there are times you kind of have to shake your head thinking that was probably assumed somewhere along the way. American Airlines kind of pushed it up a little bit further. This was on a packet of nuts they served, and they have instructions to open the packet and eat the nuts. And I'm thinking, if you're not smart enough to figure out how to open a packet and eat nuts, you probably shouldn't be on an airplane. And finally, this is on a Swedish-made chainsaw, and I think it's good advice for anybody using a chainsaw. Do not attempt to stop the chain with your hands. Once again, I think there's probably lawsuits that drove a lot of these, but it brings me back to my original point of how much can we assume? When we look at something that we're creating and assuming and creating something for other people to use, can we assume that there's an understanding that the stuff that we're doing is intuitive, or is it not intuitive? Now, it's a very interesting question, something I've spent a fair amount of my career thinking about. As we put content together, how do we make something intuitive? How do we structure it so that it's readily understandable by the people we're trying to work with here? Now, there are a couple of different things that really work into this. Our assumptions and what makes something intuitive is going to be based upon our history, what we've experienced in the past, right? So things that we've done in the past, by the way, if you're a small child and your mother tells you not to put your hand on a hot stove and you do it anyway, you're probably going to learn a very important lesson that day. Okay, so previous experiences tell us a lot about our world to keep us alive, to keep us safe, but also about what we like. Once again, if I go to the supermarket, my previous experience buying groceries is going to serve as a guideline for me to know what I want to buy the next time. Now, I also look around the world. There's something called cognitive perception. I look at things and I ascertain meaning because I have enough pieces of the puzzle to understand how it all comes together. I'm always looking for cues. I'm looking for things for me, right? So as I look around the world, I'm looking for things. Wow, that's a really nice car. I like that car, but I'm also looking for understanding in things. Should I cross the road right now? No, because there's a light saying do not walk, or there are cars coming, whatever it is from a cue standpoint. Now, from a marketing standpoint, I'm constantly scanning, looking for stuff that's of interest to me. Now, I might also be in a completely different place in my life today than I was a week ago. Maybe I just bought a new puppy. Okay, now the new puppy is really an interesting part and a great addition to my life. I love being a puppy owner, but the challenge I'm running into is now I'm kind of dealing with the needs of another being, this puppy. So suddenly my brain is tuning into all sorts of things in the world for maybe puppy training, maybe different kinds of food for puppies, maybe toys for my puppy, maybe stores that cater to the needs of my dog. Okay, so I'm looking for available cues. So I have different life experiences from you and from other people that is going to alter how I perceive the world and also what I consider to be intuitive. Now, a lot of what I'm trying to do in my day-to-day life is I'm trying to solve problems. I'm trying to go out there and I'm trying to do a better job of pulling the right information into my brain and into my life by figuring out what's out there. Now, it's an interesting approach when we look at different things, once again, from a usability design, because we have to ask ourselves the question, when is something obvious and when is something not obvious? So, for example, I'm standing in a hotel, and I just happened to see this on the front of a vending machine. And I just started laughing because for me, this is just, I love the universal symbols of things that aren't that universal. I think, all right, warning. It's like, what is it telling me not to do? Well, it's telling me not to rock the vending machine because it will probably crush me like a bug. And I just thought it was very interesting that they had to put this on a vending machine. And once again, wondering how many people had crushed themselves like a bug and whether or not putting this on a vending machine really changed that behavior or not. But it's an interesting thing. Also in a hotel room, you can read this somewhat. It's not a very good photograph, but Glass Force Professional Strength Glass Cleaner. And in big letters down the side, do not drink. And I'm thinking, who is this for? Hopefully it's not for the maids who are cleaning the rooms in the hotel. It's probably for the drunk patron who's walking by the maid car going, blue, that looks good. Probably not so good. All right, but anyway, do not drink it. You would assume this would be intuitive as well. I love this. Popped it up on my window one day. Had to take a screenshot. Thank you for your time. This window will close automatically. And then a button that will close the window if I click on it. So is it going to close automatically or do I have to do it? And why is there a redundancy feature here? Is it necessary? But there we go. I was, once again, I think I spend way too much time in hotels, but this is in a Sheraton hotel. And there's a sign in the shower that is explaining to me how to operate the shower. So pull to operate the shower. Now, the reason the sign was in the shower with me is because there was absolutely no way I would be able to figure it out because it was not intuitive. The use of the shower, which you figure should be fairly intuitive when we all try different designs in showers, it just wasn't there for me. And I have a feeling that when the hotel first opened, there were probably more than one hotel guest calling down frustrated going, how do you turn on the shower? So they had to go through all the rooms and put in a sign that explained to it. So the design of the shower itself is not intuitive. They had to put something in that would help make it more intuitive. This is just one of these shake your head, wonder what it is they were trying to do, but here we go. Notice public bar. Our public bar is presently not open because it is closed. Okay. How do you argue with that logic? And finally, I'm coming off an airplane one day and leaving the airport, and I, very tired, as often happens when you crawl off an airplane, and I saw a sign which I had to stop and take a picture of because it confused me. It says, exit, please do not enter. And my question to myself at that point was, well, am I entering or am I exiting? Because I'm actually just going to walk down this hallway next to the sign, so I think I'm exiting, which means I should probably exit but not enter. Anyway. You understand? So the thing is, even dumb ideas, simple things we should be able to understand readily, usability is not automatically assumed. These are confusing ways to communicate with other people, okay? Even though we take it for granted that that's all we do. Just put up a sign, people will understand what the meaning is, and we can move on. When we think about intuitive design, especially when we're creating content that's going to be interacted with in a digital media, we have to think about what it is that people understand and what people are going to automatically assume when they look at something like that. So features and tools that require little to no explanation regarding how they work. And we're looking for cues. Now, if I created some sort of an interactive thing and I said, by the way, I want this to be intuitive. I want people to understand automatically they should click on this to do something. Well, which one of these would you choose? We have a big red button on one side and we have a house cat on the other side. Well, duh, right? The house cat, there's nothing about the house cat that says this is an interactive media. I should go click on the cat. The button has a real world design element that makes me think, oh, I understand what a button is. That's interactive. That's what its job is. So I'll click on it. But what if I wanted to use the cat because what I was creating was a cat-themed project? Well, in that context, the button might work, but I really want to focus on the cat. Well, now I just need to put another layer of information. So if I just put this in there, now both of these are relatively even, right? Click me. So it's just an instruction that automatically draws intuition into the format. All right? Now, unless I can't read, this is going to make it, oh, by the way, click the cat. That's what I need to do because the cat, in this context, is a button. So that will work for me. So sometimes just by adding just a little bit more information allows us to get all the information, all the meaning across that we want. Now, a lot of times when we look at design in the real world, logical assumptions don't always work. All right, so let's say you're at a friend's house and you're making dinner together. By the way, we're looking down at the top of your friend's stove, okay? It's a 4-burner stove. And your friend is busy cooling the pasta off in the sink and says, hey, could you do me a favor? Could you turn the burner off? Now, let's just say that you couldn't see the position of the knobs. And I were to say, okay, I need to turn the burner off. Which knob do I turn? Now, in this example, I'm going to assume that it's going to be one of the knobs on the right-hand side. Now, I don't know if it's the first knob or the second knob. And, I might have to turn and try a little trial and error to get there before I get the successful results that I want. Now, is this a horrible thing? Not really, but what if we just design the stove a little bit differently so that it looked like this? Now, which knob would I go for? And the odds are, 100% of the time, the person would understand which knob to turn in order to turn off that burner. Once again, this is not earth-shattering. It's not designed to be. What it's designed to be is to allow us to think more about how we can design content so that we don't have to leave the door open for misunderstanding. Okay? The first stove here, I'm sure it's fine. It's highly functional. The second stove makes it so much easier to associate the meaning and the function with what we're trying to accomplish. And that's really what we're trying to do when we create any kind of content that's being used by other people. Many years ago, I created what I called the Ring of Doors model. And the Ring of Doors model was based on a conversation I had with a coworker. We were talking about pretty much what we're discussing right now, which was intuitive design. And I said, okay, well, let's just say you didn't know an awful lot about what was going on. You wake up in this room. It's a circular room, and you have no idea how you got there. All you know is that there's an equipment locker in the middle of the room. And there's a sign on the side of the locker that says you are only able to take one item out of this locker. Okay, you can only carry one item. And there's a timer that's counting down, and it notifies you that within the next 3 minutes, the room is going to be filled with poisonous gas. So your job is to figure out what you need to take out of that equipment locker and which door you should walk through. Well, here's the problem. There's 6 doors surrounding you. You don't necessarily know what door goes to where, but you do have a list of all of the possible destinations. So one of the doors will drop you off 100 feet below the surface of the ocean. Once again, might be a bad place to be. Another will drop you 15,000 feet in the air. Another halfway up an ice cliff wall, another in the middle of the desert, another in the middle of a rainforest, and another at the bottom of a deep cave. So once again, you're only allowed to take one item from the equipment locker. So what do you take? Well, the answer is, it depends, right? Which door am I going through? I have no idea. So there's a scuba tank there, there's a parachute there, there's a big flashlight there, there's, whatever you might need. There's equipment, but I don't know how to apply it. I don't know what to take because I don't know where I'm going. So the chances of you grabbing the right thing and going through the right door are pretty limited. So it's very possible you're going to be dead whether you stay or leave in the next few minutes. This is a predicament, okay? This is not something you would want to face. However, we might have a little bit of information because it turns out that somebody who had preceded you, who had been in this room, when they went through their door, they had taken a piece of chalk from their pocket and they had quickly scribbled this on the door. Well, what does that mean? The 4 chalk lines written on the... Well, guess what? When we look at that, and why do we know this? We don't know it, but our brains go, that's the ocean. Grab the scuba gear. That's what we're going to be needing if we go through this door. Okay. Now, how do we know this? Well, we know it because we know it. I mean, it's as dumb as that sounds. This is intuitive to a lot of us. It bypasses language. It bypasses a lot of things. And if you were to ask me to explain to you how I know that that represents water, I don't know. Okay? But it just does. The good news here is I have enough information now that I can probably survive my predicament. Grab the right equipment, go through the right door, and swim to the surface. Right? So I'm trying to do whatever I can to solve my problem. Now, obviously, this is a much more over-the-top model than we have to work with when we create content for other people. But the overall point that I'm trying to make is that we need to give them enough information to make the decisions that are going to help them in their journey as well. We need to figure out the smallest part of the story we can tell to the people that we're communicating with that allows them to understand what it is they need to do, how to change their perception, how to understand how this affects them in some way, right? Because they're looking for cues as well. They're looking for things that will help them solve their problems. When we look at something that's very universal, let's talk about restroom signs, because I find there's such an interesting approach to how people try to talk about something that we would consider very fundamental. Now, you're traveling somewhere in the world and you really are trying to do a better job of learning the language, but you don't necessarily know everything you need to know. So we use these universal signs, these things that allow us to go out and identify which restroom we should walk into. Because at the end of the day, the problem I'm trying to solve is I just want to use the right restroom when I need it. I don't want to guess about it. I don't want to make it difficult. I just want to use the right restroom, right? Well, from a design standpoint, this is pretty fundamental. This gives me the information I want. Although I'm thinking, first of all, I don't know many women who wear this kind of a triangle dress, although I guess it still gets the point across. But we can change it up a little bit, right? So if I walked in here, it gives me a sense which is the men's room and which is the ladies' room, right? Basically based upon our postures. This one's a little funkier, okay, but we still have some information that's working either way for us. This is just naughty, but there it is nonetheless. We also have things that are more representative. So if I'm in a restaurant and it's got some different options for me, I have to ask myself, am I a pointer or a setter? All right. So I have to be able to get the humor, understand what it will do for me, etc. This is from a Dallas pizza parlor. I love this, Automatically, first of all, thematically aligned with the pizza parlor, but fundamentally, because there's a metaphor here, I understand which is the men's room and which is the ladies' room. Now, is this representative and are most people going to understand this? Hard to say. But it's interesting how we can communicate the same concept using a whole bunch of different methodologies. And really, from a fundamental design, we can have fun with it. It isn't always super clear, but we can do what we can to make it clear. And we make it clear by making it attractive, by drawing people's attention to things. So we've talked about putting our message together. We've talked about how to create things so that they're intuitive. Now we need to talk about visual design. How do we pull these things together so that it's interesting? So it's the kind of thing that we can communicate with the people we're trying to talk to. And it's also the kind of thing that's going to attract their attention because it is visually interesting. The bottom line when we talk about any kind of visual content here is that if the participant can't easily perceive what we're trying to communicate, they can't understand it, right? So we need to make sure that, first of all, what we're trying to communicate is something that the person can see and can visualize. Now, several years ago, a friend of mine who was taking a course was working on something and said, hey, I put together this presentation. I was wondering if you could look at it and tell me what you think. Well, I've had this presentation. I've probably shown this particular slide dozens of times in my career, and I don't think I've read this thing yet. Why? Because it's really hard to read. The font is almost impossible to hack through. There are places where it doesn't really show up very well. The colors are kind of weird. It's not a good design. Here's another example of something that's equally not so good in the sense that there's so much information on this page that how can you possibly even make sense of what this means? Okay, there's a lot. The content, the information could be fine, but it doesn't necessarily allow me to present it to somebody else and have them go, oh, I understand what that means. Right? So there's too much information in this context. The other one's just really too hard to see. So we have to be very careful about how we design things for other people to use. So we talk about the fundamentals of visual design. We have to think about, first of all, cultural things. Well, this is a product from Argentina, by the way. It's a meat patty. It's a hamburger patty, and it's called barfi. By the way, from an American audience standpoint, not the best choice for something that you're going to get people to buy as a food product. By the way, here's one of those great signs. Warning, alcohol impairs judgment, and there's a guy kissing a fish. So I guess we should avoid doing that at all costs. But once again, it's an interesting approach to try to get the message across. Here, somebody's trying to get us to attract new business. So oftentimes I look at something like that and say it's a very simple design, but I'm already put off by the fact that there's a typo, a spelling mistake in this thing. That's not going to work out really well for me. This is one of the things that said maybe you should have spent more time in school before you started painting signs on the road. Here's somebody else who is also having a hard time with the school zone. Either way, now obviously there's a put up there for fun reasons, but once again, these are huge fails from a visual design standpoint, and these are really simple examples. All right, if you can't get letters spray painted on a road right, you're gonna have a hard time putting together a really complex and interesting landing page. So with design, we're looking for truths. We're looking for elements that allow us to also focus on enhancing what we're trying to communicate. We don't want things to be so busy or so interesting that they detract from the actual message that we're trying to present, right? We want to make sure that we are using our design to push the message across, to get it closer to our end user. So once again, meaning and design can work against one another. And here's just an easy example. If I were to just change the fonts of something fundamental, your brain is just going to say, wait a second, that's not going to work. I mean, by the way, would you be happy putting your money in the First National Bank and Trust if they use that font? Center for Holistic Care doesn't just seem very holistic. Heavy metal fan bash in a nice script. We look at these and our brains once again make assumptions. This is not right. This is not normal. And this does not present the meaning we want it to present. So I want to talk about the 4 pillars of visual design for a few minutes and really talk about how we can use this understanding to, even if we can't create it, to at least work with other people to get a better sense of how we can do a better job designing content. And so we're going to take a look at the 4 pillars, which are contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Now, I wish there was a good acronym and a good way for us to remember how to use these, but nothing has come to mind so far. Let's take a look at proximity first of all. So what is proximity? It's the grouping together of related items or concepts. All right, so we have something we look at and say, all right, let's take a sample business card. Now, a business card has pretty standard information on it, right? We got a name, we might have the name of the company, we might have contact information such as a phone number and maybe an address of some sort, all right? So with this information on the card, my card is pretty much done, right? This is what I need to put on a business card. Well, yes, from a content standpoint, but visually, right? This is not very exciting stuff. And first of all, I want to ask myself the question, well, of the stuff on this card, which is the most important? Which is the one I want to stand out the most? Well, I'm thinking the name of my business. That's the one I kind of want to highlight. So let's just go bold that. I'm going to bold that. Okay, good. I'm pretty much done here. Or am I? Well, I'm going to ask myself, well, my name is kind of important too, so I'll bold that. Well, now I have a situation where the visual aspects of this, as I'm looking at this, my eyes start ping-ponging back in between the name of the company and the name that's on the business card, right? And the other information kind of gets lost in the mix. So I'm thinking, all right, well, how can I do a better job of pulling this together? Well, what I can do is I can really change how it's structured. I say, all right, well, let's put the name at the top because that's important, the name of the company underneath it, and then we'll put the rest of the information that's maybe less important, at least initially, down below that. Does that work for us? Well, you know what? We're definitely getting there. Let's take a look at some other principles here. So with proximity, we're trying to take visual separation of different things, and we're trying to basically put them together in a meaningful way. So let's say I walk into some sort of an educational supply store. Maybe it's a bookstore. And they have this on the end cap of one of the rows, and it says, check out our latest educational tools, and there's all this stuff. Now, there's nothing wrong with this list of content. This is what they sell. The problem with this is it's not really good for me and my needs as an end user. Okay, so this is all true, but when I walk into a store and I'm looking for something in particular, this is a really hard way for me to get the information that I need. So what if I took this and just altered it a little bit? I said, oh, okay, over here we have CD-ROMs, and then we have educational materials, and we have teacher tools, and then we have hardware and accessories. All right, so now I'm in a situation where I've taken the same exact information, but I've broken it down in a completely different way to make it more user-friendly, to make it more capable of communicating what it brings to the table. Let me give you another example. This is actually from something that I pulled out of a newspaper close to me a couple of years back. And it grabbed my attention because as I was thumbing through the newspaper, I saw this and said, okay, well, here's a help wanted ad. But the problem is it's basically 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag. They just shoved everything into basically one paragraph, right? It's not very readable. Once again, all the information is here. Everything I need to know as an applicant for this job is there. But there are a couple things I didn't care for. First of all, business office, AR assistant. What if I don't know what an AR assistant is? Or maybe I know what one is, I just don't recognize this. But by the way, it's an accounts receivable. So maybe I should put that information as part of how people find it. Okay, by the way, the job runs Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. Here it is. Well, I looked at this and said, you know what? Makeover time. What can we do to make this more usable? So I redesigned the ad for them. So business office seeks account receivable assistant. Very categorical, right? This is what we're trying to do. We're looking for someone who can work for us on a full-time basis, which, by the way, is the same as Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That's full-time. Now I took all the information that was just packed in together and I said, let's just break it out. Here are the responsibilities. Here are the requirements. And here are the benefits. Why should you want to work for us? What do we need from you? What can you get from us? Etc. Okay? Same information. Completely different format, and from a usability standpoint, a very different place to be. So that's one way. We take proximity, we use it to break the content down in a more meaningful way. We also have something called alignment. Now, what is alignment? Well, alignment is using symmetry and balance and spacing to create a visual border, to create frame. Alignment gives us a sense of order. And, a lot of times we look at things and we judge them saying, well, that looks pretty amateurish or that looks professional, right? So what does that mean? Well, let's go back to our business card for a moment. I look at something like this like, yeah, it's fundamentally fine. It's the right information. But what if I were just to shift everything over to the right here? Ooh, look, that's kind of a design element I didn't even think about. Okay, yeah, that looks kind of professional. Hey, I was kind of going for that. So that's a good place to start. Now, if I ask you a question, you see these three Pac-Man-like figures on the screen. I'm going to ask you this question and use your perception to the best of your ability, but is there a line between these three items? Do you see any lines that actually travel between these three items? No, because there's no line there, right? You do not see a triangle because there is no triangle. You just see, pizza slices cut out of these things. Of course you see a triangle. Your brain is filling things in. It's trying to put the missing information into place here, but we all know it's not there. And yet it is there. And this is a weird thing about alignment, for example, is that it allows us to see things that aren't really there because our brain wants it to be there. It wants us to have this sense of order. So we create content. Order is very important. How things are lined up against one another is incredibly important to us, and we want to make sure that it works for us. Now, I want to talk a little bit about repetition, which is another area that we need to talk about, and that's the reuse of visual cues that can take uncommon items and allow us to pull them together in one place. Okay? It allows us to identify like things, and it gives us, from a visual standpoint, it gives us a place to start and a place to end. We understand what that means. All right. So once again, with something like our business card, if I were to just make a really, really simple change and put a line in there, look at that. Kind of cool, huh? All right. It's a design element. It hasn't changed the meaning, but once again, it's easier on the eyes. It's just kind of a more interesting approach. So let's go back to the job wanted ad that we're looking at. Now, one of the things that I did here is I pulled all the different elements together by just putting a bullet next to them, right? Here are the responsibilities and some bulleted items and requirements and some bulleted items and some benefits. Now, that is a very simple approach to take that information. And it's actually probably the right approach because this is like information being grouped together. Now, I'm going to make one simple change to this ad. And I want you to watch the screen. And I want you to kind of experience what happens when things seem to fall apart a little bit. You ready? Here we go. Did you catch that? Let me go back. Suddenly, I changed all the bullets. The bullets are nonsensical. They're all different. And that continuity, that feeling that everything belonged together, it went away. And in a lot of ways, this is a disturbing thing. I mean, as dumb as it sounds and as minor as it sounds, this is a very simple experiment for our brains to kind of go, please don't do that. Make that stop, right? I much prefer this because this has order, this has meaning, and this is chaos. And we don't like chaos. We like to order our universes as individuals, as people. It's very important to us. Anyway, I put it out there because I think it's a very simple and yet interesting approach. And finally, let's talk about contrast. Now, contrast allows us to grab people's attention. It's basically making a big noise visually so that people can focus on the things that we think are the most important things. But it doesn't have to be over the top to be effective. So if we go back to our business card and just do something a little, inverse here on the header, put a black box in, look at that. It's a different business card altogether. Now, the point I want to make here is we took some elements of design, we added it to a very simple model, and we created something that's kind of visually interesting, and it still has the same information as when we started, which was here. Okay? Big difference and yet no difference from a content standpoint at all. It's the same exact information, but how we perceive it as an end user is very different. Anyway, when we talk about visual design, a couple fundamentals that I want you to understand. First of all, too much content is the same as none. We don't want to put so much stuff in there that it's just noise and confusion. We want to make sure that it's very easy to understand. And there's an old adage here that talks about the best way to eat an elephant, which is one bite at a time. And if you just had suddenly your job was to eat an elephant, it's a very daunting task. But if you had one meal a day, over time, you can get through the elephant. But we also want to make sure that when we communicate anything with anybody, we're not trying to overly impress them with language they're not going to understand, or jargon, or acronyms, or other things. We want to make sure that the people we're talking to don't feel left out. We want them to be comfortable, and we're trying to impress them at the end of the day, not ourselves, right? If we're the advertiser trying to reach them, we're the person trying to communicate with them in some way. And we also want to tell our audience how they can get the information. We want to take mysteries out of it. We want to make the engagement fun and interesting. We want to make the navigation intuitive. And we want to let them know what they need to do overall to get to the benefit. And at the end of the day, we want to tell them how to eat the elephant. We want to take out any mysteries that are in there with regard to the navigation or content or how to get the benefit, anything like that. We want to make it easy for the people at the end of the day to solve their problems, to get the information they want, and to move forward. So in summary, we don't want to inundate people with information. We never do. We want to inform them the best we can. We want to make sure we understand who they are so we can cater to their individual needs or their needs as an audience, as a group of people who have similarities. We want to make sure that everything we design, especially for online use, is intuitive. Very important. And by the way, most cases, less is often more. We don't want to have so much information that people have to sort through it. Make it easy to understand. Make it easy to assimilate. And that's all I have. So thank you so much for the time you spent going through this. Hopefully this has been a good presentation for you and you walked away with some good understanding. By the way, come over to spidergram.com. Check out what we're doing there. We have training and skill building resources for marketers, for entrepreneurs, for people who are trying to make a big difference in their lives. So whatever it is that you're doing, join the community. Great people to talk to, great things to learn from, plenty of videos like this one sitting around there, and would love to be able to share that content with you. This is Spider Graham. Thanks again for your time, and I'll see you real soon.